David Brewster here on the Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. And if you've been playing guitar for any length of time, you may have noticed it's really easy to fall into a rut or to kind of cling to your comfort zone. And by that I mean, songs and licks and riffs and chords and all sorts of things that you find easy to play. You can almost kind of think of that as like a security blanket or your pacifier. That's your comfort zone, things that you can do. And then as soon as you find something that you can't do, or it's a challenge, or it's confusing, or it's a technical hurdle, or a new technique, or something like that, one of two things can happen. Some people, they'll hit the challenge head on and they'll push their way through that difficult area until they're able to do it. They rise to the occasion. The other type runs screaming, in the other direction, and they're terrified, and they go right back to their comfort zone or their security blanket. And this lesson is going to basically focus on some ideas and approaches and some suggestions to kind of help you break out of those comfort zones and really help you make some progress and kind of push forward, with the guitar, your technique, and your ability on the instrument. So here we go. The first image I'm going to share here, these are just 12 suggestions or tips that can help you break out of your comfort zone. And these are just simple things that you can do. If you always play electric guitar, then pick up an acoustic guitar. Or if you always play a 6-string, then grab, like a 12-string or a 7-string or something. Or, if you haven't really finger picked before, then investigate, finger style and finger picking and stuff like that. So check these ideas out, and you can pause it, to make sure you can actually see all 12 of these ideas. And there's, hundreds of other ideas on top of this. But here's a dozen that might help right off the bat. I'm going to share a couple examples of, me pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And one of them actually has occurred right here in front of you. If you've been watching my channel, you may have noticed that I've switched, from having the guitar on my right leg to having the guitar on my left leg, in more of a classical guitarist, playing position or style. And that's just for me. That's just kind of shaking things up and challenging myself. And it's harder for me to play guitar on my left leg compared to my right leg. So this is my comfort leg. And this is my uncomfortable leg, but I'm doing it on purpose, as a challenge and trying to correct some things and work on my technique and stretching. And that's a big boost. It's definitely a hurdle I'm jumping over. And another example would be I was working at Guitar Center in Asheville, North Carolina for a couple years. I was their educational coordinator, or whatever my title was. But in the lesson studios, they had amps provided. And in my room, there was a Blackstar HT Club 40. Just a basic, no frills, guitar combo. And a 40-watt, 112, 3-band EQ, 2 channels, reverb, and that was basically it. And when I started teaching there, I decided, okay, I'm going to show up for work. I'm just going to plug directly in this amp and just make it work, for my students or whatever I'm doing. And it was really hard in the beginning because I didn't bring pedals. I didn't bring like a little pedal board or whatever. It was just guitar and the amp, make it work, every day. That was 6 days a week, basically for 2 years. That was really hard initially, but then eventually it broke me out of my comfort zone, needing certain pedals or a certain amp or whatever. And I noticed like, hey, I'm pushing myself, making myself do this. Breaking out of your comfort zone and really kind of, pushing yourself in some different directions. You definitely, should think creatively, think outside of the box, just experiment and try things, even if it seems silly at first, and you might be sitting there thinking, man, I'm never going to do this again. Go ahead and practice it anyway, because you never know. You might actually end up doing it every time you pick up the guitar, or you might, write a song or come up with some, wicked lick or something that that people have never seen or heard before. So don't be afraid, afraid to experiment. Try some unusual approaches. Just whatever comes to your mind. I've seen photographs of Buckethead, using a Godzilla toy as a pick. I've seen, crazy things, Steve Vai and all these different, players really pushing themselves in some unusual directions. But here's a quote from Eddie Van Halen that might inspire you to kind of think, creatively. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to lock on to a very common comfort zone, and that's the minor pentatonic scale. It seems like everybody and their grandmother knows how to play the minor pentatonic on the guitar, the box. But it does seem like a lot of players get locked into the box and they can't break out of it, and they just kind of stay there and they play solos and licks and fills and riffs or whatever directly out of that box, formation. And it's really easy, to kind of fall into a rut or a pentatonic, rut or whatever. But what we're going to do here, I'm just going to pick a key first. So let's do C sharp minor. And there's really no reason, I'm just kind of randomly picking that key. I do like C sharp minor. But let's think of the C sharp minor pentatonic box right here. And that's the culprit right there that most people kind of fall into a rut right there with that scale. And it's really easy to fall into that rut. So let's try some things and just kind of think, a little differently about that scale. So let's think of a C sharp minor 7 arpeggio first, all right, like this. And all we're really doing there is just avoiding the 4th, this F sharp. And if you look at the notes, it's almost like the C sharp minor pentatonic scale. And we're just leaving that 4th out. So that's one thing you can do immediately is, kind of look at the minor pentatonic and realize, you're really just adding one note to the minor 7 arpeggio and it's converting it into minor pentatonic. Another thing you can try here, we're just throwing out some ideas. The minor pentatonic is built 2 notes per string, right? So let's ascend through the scale and just grab, one of the 2 notes. Let's grab the higher and then the lower, or I'm sorry, the lower and then the higher on each string group, like this. And that's C sharp minor pentatonic, but we're just grabbing this kind of alternating, 1 note per string pattern. And then you can reverse it on the way down. Just a really different way of looking at that, scale and playing through it. And then, once you kind of get used to that, because we're really, leaving notes out and then we're picking them up on the way back down. But then try something like string skipping through the scale. Just kind of play leapfrog all the way through that minor pentatonic box, like this. And you could use legato. Or you can pick it or whatever you want to do. And then you can start string skipping. And here we're going to basically string skip, and then we want to play 2 strings of that minor pentatonic, like this. And I'm really just throwing out these different ideas, maybe things that you haven't thought of or played before, and it's going to feel unusual, if you haven't done that before, but we're just shaking things up. Now for another idea here, we're going to continue string skipping, but now what we're going to do is I'm going to connect this in different positions of C sharp minor pentatonic, like this. And right there we started in the box, right? So we ascended, and then I'm moving to shape 2 of C sharp minor pentatonic right there, and I'm kind of borrowing that same fingering right there. And that kind of index pinky, index 3rd finger shape, a minor 3rd and a major 2nd right there, like that. And then repeat that right here. And we're going to move up to the position right here. And then we're kind of flipping that fingering, pattern we had at the beginning. That minor 3rd, major 2nd fingering. So now we're doing a major 2nd to minor 3rd fingering here, and we're string skipping still. And then move to the next position of C sharp minor pentatonic and do it again right here. And then grab that B note and bend to C sharp. It's like one of my favorite, pentatonic based ideas, and it's not really that hard to play. I mean, once you kind of see the pattern, but it sounds wicked. This next area I've nicknamed Diminished Madness because we're going to be looking at some diminished arpeggios and diminished seventh arpeggios. And this first idea is really common. I've actually shown this, in a few other episodes on this channel, and I've nicknamed this the Yngwie Malmsteen Diminished Highway. And we're basically just playing this A diminished seventh arpeggio, and then we're shifting it, moving it up the fretboard. So this is really common, but something like this. And basically, if I break that down, there's A diminished seven right here. And you've got this, minor third. You've got a note on the B string, and then another minor third there on the high E, like that. And then we're really just kind of moving up in minor thirds, like that. And I was also weaving between those shapes and kind of, combining ascending and descending, sequencing. So I was doing this. One more time right there. And that's a cool, sequence to practice. It definitely weaves between those positions, and it sounds really cool. And then if you're thinking of this diminished seventh arpeggio, there's a lesser known, it's still common, but a lot of people, it seems like they don't realize it's right there. But there's your A diminished seven, right? And then right here on the next set of strings, the D, G, and B strings, there's E flat diminished seven. And you're doing this. Kind of like the upside down version of what we just played in A. There's A diminished seven, and then that E flat diminished seven lives right there, like this. And you can see that note in the middle, like that kind of middle string. Now you're using your middle finger, and it's just a half step away from where your index was, instead of the other shape where we had, your third finger, and it was a whole step there, away from your index finger. But anyway, this. You can basically do the same kind of idea we did with A, like this. Just kind of weaving between those shapes. For a big challenge using these diminished arpeggios, take both of those fingerings we just looked at and combine them together, and then start weaving between them like we did earlier. And this is pretty tough, but something like this. So one more time, a little bit slower there so you can actually see it. Playing that lower diminished seventh arpeggio, that E flat diminished seven right here. And then right there, you want to ascend that A diminished seven arpeggio right here. And then you basically want to shift to the next position and then descend. And then shift to the next position and ascend. And then shift and descend. Shift, ascend, and then shift and descend. And then you're basically just ending on that E flat if you want. But those kind of exercises are great because you're weaving and changing positions and you're combining, these arpeggios together, and it just sounds awesome. Next idea I'm going to share here actually comes from Scott Henderson, and Scott Henderson's a legend of fusion and guitar education. He's been an instructor at MI for decades, worked with Chick Corea, formed his own band, Tribal Tech, and he's played, jazz and fusion and rock and blues and funk and all these different styles of music, and he's brilliant, and his ideas are brilliant. I actually met Scott when I was a student in Atlanta, too, at AIM, and that was the first clinic that came to the school when I was a student. And all the students were just completely blown away. It was him and Gary Willis. It was basically Tribal Tech. They came in and just blew the roof off the school, and we all left. I was like just completely blown away, so confused. I thought, man, I don't even know what I just saw, but it was amazing. But anyway, this idea actually came from Scott's melodic phrasing instructional video from the 90s, and all of Scott's educational material, books, videos, everything. Brilliant. But anyway, this idea, we're going to solo over a 2-chord progression, but the progression's non-diatonic, so these chords don't really relate or fit together, like in music theory terms. But when you play a non-diatonic progression, that's basically what you're doing. You're forcing the square peg, like in the round hole, so to speak. So we're going to hit this F sharp minor 7, and then I want you to move that to A minor 7 right here. And those 2 chords, even though it sounds good, they don't really fit together. Because if you think of this A minor 7 as the 1, in A major, that would be the 1, and then F sharp minor would be the 6, right? The relative minor. So that's normal. That's the expected way of playing that. A major 1 to a minor 6. But we flip this to a minor 1, that A minor 7, and then that minor 6, that F sharp minor 7. Going to solo over that, I'm going to use the TC Electronic Ditto looper just to kind of help me play that progression behind me. But most guitarists, if you're a blues or rock bass guitarist, pentatonic bass guitarist, most players would play it like this, like over the F sharp minor 7, they'd play F sharp minor pentatonic. When it changes to A minor 7, then they just shift to A minor pentatonic. And there's nothing wrong with this approach, but it is very kind of typical or almost expected, and like if you hear somebody playing like that, it's really obvious, where it's like, oh, he's just moving with the chords. You can really hear it. Something like this. Right? You can hear, where I was kind of moving from F sharp minor to A minor. But this approach is different. That's not the Scott Henderson thing. This is the Scott Henderson thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically target a chromatic scale, kind of, loosely. And we're going to grab this little pocket of notes right here. 4 notes per string on 4 strings, starting on this F sharp on the D. And what we're going to do is over that F sharp minor 7, we're going to start on that F sharp right there. And then when it moves to A minor 7, we're going to move to the next note in that little chromatic cluster. Something like this. But you could kind of hear what I was doing right there, that little chromatic climb up. So I'm not really showing you that like, hey, there's your new guitar solo for your new song, because that's not obviously what you want to play, for a solo. I mean, you could actually use that, like as a lead. It would be kind of weird to hear somebody play a lead like that. But really what this is demonstrating or showing you are options over that progression. Instead of having to shift, from one scale to another when the chord changes, you can actually push through that progression. So instead of playing over changes, we're literally playing through the changes, so to speak. And that's what's happening there. That F sharp, fit over that F sharp minor 7, and then we move to that G, and that's the flat 7 of A minor 7, right? And when it goes back to that F sharp minor 7, then we're basically kind of flirting with this 9th right there. That G sharp. And then right after that, when it goes back to A minor 7, then we change to A, which is the root over that chord. And that was just the first 4 notes right there. But thinking this way and noticing that you can really kind of push through progressions like that, that might open up a completely different, strategy or approach, for building a lead or playing a solo or improvisation. I know when I first saw that, it blew my mind, where I thought, wait a minute, like all the rules just went right out the window. And, he was navigating through that on his instructional video. The last idea I'm going to share here actually comes from the late great jazz legend Joe Pass. And spoiler alert in case you aren't aware, but some of the best, outside the box and left field, musical approaches come from jazz. And of course you can pick up stuff from classical and metal and some other styles of music too. But literally, jazz music has like this just abundance of all these just really different and modern and unusual, ideas and approaches and techniques. And this is definitely one of those kind of ideas. So Joe was a master, for sure. Ask anybody. Ask anybody that actually knows, who Joe Pass was, and they'll tell you. I mean, he was brilliant. But the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to break down 2 things that are going to help you see this exercise. So this is not the exercise yet. This is just like a primer, I guess, to understand his exercise. But the first thing is I want you to visualize D major 7 right here. This D major 7 chord. And then go down a minor 3rd, and there's B major 7. Alright, so in your mind, imagine those 2 chords, and like remember, D major 7 and B major 7. The other thing I want you to think in the back of your head is this little 4-note, 4-string chromatic cluster, similar to what we had with the Scott Henderson idea a moment ago, but now we're thinking chords, and we're doing this. Okay, this is still not the exercise yet. I just want you to remember this 4-note group, this 4-note group, this 4-note group, and this 4-note group. So that's not a chromatic scale, but we are using these clusters of chromatic notes on those 4 strings. Alright, so now the exercise. So this is officially the Joe Pass idea. So the first thing we're going to do is start with D major 7 and just kind of pick through it and go through this really slow. Use some kind of firm finger pressure, when you're fretting these chords, and just kind of pick or strum through them really slowly. This isn't a race, it's a warm-up. So we're doing this. Alright, and that's the first cycle, or the first step right here. So there's D major 7, and you can see along the D string, I move down that chromatic cluster, right? Like that. And then when you get there, right, then lock onto that shape, hold that, that's your starting shape of the next pattern. And now what I want you to do is you're going to grab that chord, and then you're going to start moving those chromatic notes along the G string. So there's the first shape, the second shape, the third shape, and then the 4th shape right there. And that's tricky. I don't know if you can see that. That's basically what we just moved right there. So there's the first chord, and then the next shape, and then the next shape, and then the next shape. And once again, we just move down, along that B string. And let's do that one more time, but now we're on the high E string, right? And then with the last group, there's your first chord right here. And then you're going to basically move along that high E string, and then do it again. You're going to end with that B major 7 right there. So once you hit B major 7, then you're at the end, because we started with D major 7, if you remember. Moved all the way through all 4 sets on all, 4 groups of those chords, and then we end on B major 7. So that's that's a really interesting and very demanding exercise because you're working on finger independence, you're building strength, you're building some dexterity and agility. That's a really great exercise for sure. I mean, it'll keep you on your fingertips and on your toes, so to speak. And I think I just screwed that one up because I was talking instead of paying attention to what I'm doing. But there's tons of exercises like this. And if you're familiar with John Petrucci and his Rock Discipline video, he opens that video, I think, with like stretches and massages. And then he taught, this really popular and common chord-based, kind of warm-up exercise. But that exercise actually came from jazz. That's not something that John wrote. More than likely, he probably picked it up from Joe Pass. Not personally, he probably just picked it up from some of his material. But those kind of exercises are brutal. They really make you think, differently about the fretboard. You're using all 4 of your fingers. Definitely challenging, your position playing and your fret hand. Great stuff to practice. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with Step Outside Your Comfort Zone. And this is just a few examples. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of things that you could try and practice and approach and use to kind of help you really boost your ability and kind of get you comfortable with some different and kind of outside the box or left field approaches. And whether that's picking or fingering or changing positions or chords or scales or whatever it is you're practicing, you can always find workouts and warm-ups and variations and just a wealth of all these different ideas. But you have to dig for it. If you're a rock player and you kind of find yourself feeling kind of stale with your rock-based ideas, dive into another style. Play some funk or jazz or blues or bluegrass or whatever, classical or whatever, and it will kind of inspire you and it'll kind of move you in a different direction. And then when you kind of get your hands dirty and your feet wet with some of these new sounds and approaches and ideas, and then you bring them back to your rock world or whatever world you're in, it's going to sound fresh and exciting. And you're going to be like, hey, this is different. It's not that same old stuff that I've been practicing for years. This is something brand new. No way. And it's inspiring. It's going to push you and motivate you, hopefully, in some different directions, which is the whole point. It's like the biggest part of late night lessons is just kind of throwing out some different ideas, finding inspiration, shaking things up, and really just trying to pushing yourself in a different way. So good luck with this stuff. Leave some feedback and comments. Let me know, how it goes. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.